Hey, what's up, everybody? Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Victorious Ones podcast, the place where gaming meets comics, meets sports, meets movies, as well as inspiration along with music also. So, once again, I'm your host, King Von Jr. You can follow me on social media on Twitter/X at 301 King Von Jr. You can follow me on, excuse me, you can also follow the show's Twitter page at VictoryPod1. I'm also on Instagram at Mr. King Von Jr. You can follow the show's Instagram page at Victorious Ones Podcast. I'm also the social media producer for Perfect Plex Talk Radio hosted by a friend of the program, Mike Knox. And so, welcome to June. It's the first episode of the month. We are at the halfway point of the year. This is halftime. So with that being said, I'm going to give my predictions. So of course I'm going to give my predictions of the NBA Finals. I'm going to talk about this X-Men 97 Season 2 trailer, along with the trailer for the Wolverine gameplay for Wolverine. I'm very excited about that. And I'm going to talk about the Clash in Italy, as well as the Bloodline being reloaded. You know what I mean? And just in terms of Roman Reigns' place among the top 10, and what it means to be top 10. I don't want this to be long-winded or anything like that. But yes, so that's really what it is. That's where we are right now. And so those that are watching by way of youtube.com/@VonRestForJr. Please make sure to like, subscribe for more great content. And for those that are, like I said, watching by way of Twitter, of course, 301 King Von Jr. And of course, without further ado, here we go. So one thing I forgot to mention last week was the trailer for X-Men 97 Season 2, that is. And so there's definitely going to be a huge shakeup. And this has been boiling. This has been anticipating since, for the past 2 years, with the way Season 1 just ended off on an amazingly high note. And I know that they're going to build on that even more. And the storylines, that await us, I'm excited for it. You know what I mean? And of course, see a Storm, like she's got some type of like firepower, some firestorm, I guess we say. So the thing is, the teams are going to be split up in different different groups. I think Storm's going to be lead one. Cable's going to be on the team, and he was a very prominent figure, especially when it came in last season, especially after Genosha, after Gambit's death, and just he was a pivotal part of that second half. Of that second half of the series, and like I said, they can have different factions, if you will, of the X-Men, and I definitely like the uniforms, especially. I said, here we go. And then another thing I like that really got me pumped, really got me excited was that clip of Wolverine doing like this, like this. In reference to Wolverine issue number 1, the Frank Miller of Wolverine solo cover, a very iconic picture. Where he's got the claws up on one hand, and he's doing like this in the other, and so or at least I don't know how it's gonna look right here, but yeah, like this. Like I say, there's the claws right here, and he's doing this. So as soon as I saw that, I said, yeah, sign me up. I'm glad I got Disney Plus. I'm glad I have the subscription. You know what I mean? Because this has been, my favorite, series. With on Disney Plus. It's become that. For a while, it was always the Mandalorian, and and I've also been impressed by by Daredevil. Season 1 and season 2, like the Disney Plus version of Daredevil. But the thing is, this X-Men series. Oh my gosh, it's shot up already. You know what I mean? And so as far as that, like I said, I'm excited for it, and for what lies ahead on the horizon. And also I just want to say that seen some of the previews. Also, just as a heads up, this weekend there's also going to be a He-Man Masters of the Universe, and Scary Movie 6 will debut in theaters. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how these play out. Um, so that's another thing for another day. Especially and the things normally I'm not big on remakes, but this He-Man one, I'm very looking forward to it. That. And then now, here we are, finally in the NBA Finals. Of course, with the San Antonio Spurs going up against the New York Knicks, and Game 1 is tonight. And I'm not going to be before you long. I'm not long-winded anyway. But the way I see it is, I think it's going to be very exciting. It's going to be very entertaining, and this is the ratings boost and spike that the league desperately needs at a time like this. And the last time the Knicks were in the finals was against the Spurs in 1999. I was 10 at the time. And so of course, like I said, 9 going on 10. Excuse me. But yeah, like I said, 1999, I was 10. But yeah, and so as a matter of fact, the Spurs' first championship of the franchise history was at the hands of the Knicks. So it's very full circle-ish, if you will. I don't know what to say it, but this is definitely the much needed spike that the league needs right now. So with that being said, I am going with Spurs in 5, at the most about 6, and I got Wemby as the Finals MVP. So that's my prediction. So I'm just throwing it out there right now. So and the thing is, Wemby is a force to be reckoned with. I want to use cliches, but you, like, when you see somebody who's generational, who's the equivalent of, people like to call it supernova, that's exactly what Wemby is. And if you don't see that right now, hey, look, there's nothing else. Like, that's on you. If you can't see it, that's on you. This is a transcendent figure that we have on our hands, and I believe he is someone who is undeniable, and I'm definitely looking forward to that. Now, of course, now it's time to the main thing. We'll talk about the clash in Italy, which took place. Excuse me. Tip-off is going to happen now, simultaneously as we speak. You know what I mean? And but yeah, like I said, I've already laid out my predictions, and so now it is time to go into, let's keep the main thing, which of course being the clash in Italy, which took place obviously in Italy, during the daytime, by the way, like 2 o'clock or something. So I was like, wow. All right now, and so clash in Italy, Roman Reigns storyline feels too familiar. That's what they're saying by way of Andre's Hill. But yeah, so I'm going to these results. So so of course the lineup for Clash in Italy: Tribal Combat for the World Heavyweight Title, Jacob Fatu versus Roman Reigns. We also have the WWE Championship, Cody Rhodes versus Gunther. Women's Championship, Rhea Ripley versus Jade Cargill. The Women's Intercontinental title match, Sol Walker versus Becky Lynch. And of course, Open Finley versus Brock Lesnar. The night kicks off with, the WWE Championship as the opening match. We have, we have Cody Rhodes versus the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes versus the Ring General Gunther. And the last time they faced each other, Cody defeated. Last time actually Cody Rhodes defeated Sami Zayn, and of course Gunther defeated Royce Keys. And so we saw the top prize in the industry was at stake. It's in the opening match, I might add, by the way. And so Gunther, his mission was to do the one thing he's proven incapable of so far in his career, and that was to defeat Cody Rhodes. And so it was back and forth, trading blows, chop after chop, pretty much. And there was a point where Cody delivered the pedigree. Gunther kicked out, and Gunther even kicked out the crossroads. Michael Cole even questioned whether it was too early, for Cody to put his opponent away. And Cody followed up with the Cody cutter, but Gunther caught him with a sleeper. And of course, Cody countered the champ counter with a roll up for two. And as the ring general applied the sleeper, the one he's known for, known for putting the Cena and AJ Styles to sleep. He rolled over him, of course, put his body weight, his leverage on top of Cody, all 250 pounds. Gunther. But of course, Cody, never gave up, and of course, the ring general reapplied the hold as he did, against the likes of Cena, and so of course, like I said, this match was a series of chops and clotheslines, Cody cutter, and finally crossroads that earned the American Nightmare the victory to retain the championship. And so the winner of this match is still your WWE champion, Cody Rhodes. Next up, we have the women's championship match, Rhea Ripley versus Jade Cargill, arguably the match of the night. And Jade, once again, proves to her doubters that she can actually wrestle. So if anything, I would have thought WrestleMania would have been enough to silence some of the haters. But there are people who just determined not to like Jade, whatever. It's just like, unfortunately, that's the landscape of the women's locker room, the division right now. Especially when we consider the fact that the Jade's, two biggest hitters are on maternity leave right now, as I said before. Her two main hitters, of course, being Bianca and Naomi. Two best dance partners. Like I said, both of them are on the shelf because of, for maternity leave, and Bianca's had her second baby shower. Side note. So yeah, that's what it is. And so of course, Jade is, doing everything she can to, to further elevate this division, with the dance partners that are in front of her. And we saw the first of two WrestleMania 42 rematches. Of course, this one, Rhea versus Jade. And Jay had control early, preventing Ripley from building momentum by taking her down with the fallaway slam at ringside. Of course, with those people in Italy booing her. I think we know why, but of course, Jade leaning to her strength advantage. Obviously, Jade's got the blatant strength advantage. Clearly, she knocked out Rhea with forearms to the chest. Then, of course, whipping her hard into the corner. And then, of course, Jade maintained her control. If she grounded her, put her headlock, then of course, Rhea fought back to her feet. And, of course, Jade forced her back to the mat. There's a missed elbow and a field charge to the corner, which allowed Rhea to mount a comeback, eradicate it. And so, of course, Rhea broke out a missile drop kick at Razor's Edge. And hard, of course, a Shining Wizard. But she wasn't able to keep Jade down, and Jade took Rhea to the limit, and there was even a point where where Jade even did, it looked like an outside GTS, Rhea was coming off the apron, and Jade just hit it with a knee that would have just KO'd anybody else. I said, whoa. I said, wait a minute. Um, and so of course, Rhea has had done repeated attempts at the riptide. I mean, like several of them, you know. And so of course, there was one of them where Jade countered into a DDT, but of course, Rhea kicked out too. He was a sit down power bomb, for another near fall. Of course, Rhea recovered, the Eradicator recovered, followed the side superplex, for a 2 count, and then of course, Rhea was just in disbelief. And of course, B-Fab and Charlotte Flair took turns breaking up pinfalls, but by putting their allies' foot on the bottom ropes and ensuring that the match continued. And Charlotte's distraction, went out in the end, and she allowed for Ripley to catch Jade off guard with a second riptide, for the win. And the winner of this match, and still your women's champion, WWE Women's Champion, Rhea Ripley. And then next up, we have Oba Femi versus Brock Lesnar. Oba brought 2 Electric Boogaloo, as I like to call it. So it was, a bit of a 180 from what we saw, of course, from what we saw at WrestleMania. Of course, where Oba was, more in control, and the match didn't last that long, obviously at Mania, but that was a very crowning moment, crowning achievement at that time. However, Brock was like, "Now on my watch." So it was Brock Oba 2 Electric Boogaloo, and so in this match, and of course, as we saw on Raw, the Go Home show, so Brock, delivered multiple F5s, you know what I mean, and actually not even the Go Home show, but yeah, as far as that, but of course, in this match, Oba was getting destroyed, and Brock delivered not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, but 7 F5s to put down the ruler. And it somewhat reminded me of SummerSlam 2014, the Suplex City match. Brock, like the Suplex City match, Brock was throwing Cena around with 16 German suplexes and 2 F5s. Instead of 2 F5s, he delivers 7 to Oba. And I was like, so at first it looked like, Oba was going through a bit of a humbling process, if you will. But I was like, man, and it's just like, it wasn't as much offense that Oba could deliver, but I had a prediction that the Brock was going to win, just for the sake of, like I said, just for the sake of the third and final match, which is, it looks like, all roads, the writing's on the wall, all roads are going to lead to SummerSlam in Minnesota, which is going to be Brock's farewell. So that's going to be, that's going to be the tiebreaker, the finale, if you will, the final send off, because Brock's already made it obvious that he wants nothing to do with Gunther, and there's nothing else left for him to really do, outside of this storyline of this program Open. And I was like, man, this was, and of course Brock came out to a massive ovation. Of course, Italy loves Brock Lesnar, and Brock is an attraction. Don't get me wrong, but this is definitely a passing of the torch in more ways than one. Do we like the way that the Brock hit a pump fake with his retirement? Not really, but as long as in the end game, Oba comes out on top and is victorious, the way he needs to be, then then so be it. But like the hardest F5 was the one through the table, though. That one right there was, wait a minute. So of course, after the match, Brock was saying 1 + 1, is, I was like, all right, that's Lesnar math, I guess. Then for the Women's Intercontinental Championship, Soul Worker versus Becky Lynch. The winner of this match, by way of the Soul Snatcher, none other than Soul Worker. She has made history as officially the first Black woman to win the Women's Intercontinental Championship. And so I know there's discourse about you know, so this discourse about souls, level blackness and things like that. But she's biracial. So last time I checked, we all know what that one drop thing is, right? And so with that being said, I'm not gonna rain on a parade or dim her light or anything like that. So the winner of this match was so rude. I was very surprised because I thought that Becky was going to repeatedly beat her and and of course hold the title a little bit longer, but that wasn't the case. So yeah, so that's what it was. That soul snatcher is no joke. I like that. That's like a front flipper, back flip RKO. I was like, oh, cool. All right, now my first other thing on NXT. I said, all right, now this is the real deal. And last but not least, Tribal Combat. The Samoan Werewolf, Jacob Fatu, versus the Tribal Chief, Roman Reigns. I'm going to talk about the Wolverine trailer later. But yeah, there's no DQ, no count out, and victory will only be attained by either pinfall or submission. And by the way, thankfully there was no interference in this match. There was stipulations facing Roman Reigns and Jacob Fatu as they battled in Sunday's main event, and the loser will have to acknowledge the winner as their tribal chief. So it was not only for the World Heavyweight title, but also for the title of tribal chief. They had the table. And clearly it didn't take long for the action to just spill out into the crowd. And of course they continue to like I said, just destroy each other, and of course all around the ring before Reigns and Fatu into the ring steps and sees momentary control of the match. And Samoan Werewolf, end up following up with an effective kick to the head, fired up following an effective kick to the head by the OTC, so Roman's kick didn't work. And of course, Samoan Werewolf built his momentum, and however, with an ill-fated pop-up, it resulted in Reigns catching him with a Superman punch, which only led to a 2 count. And of course, Roman halted another Jacob offense as the action returned to the floor, and Roman even pulled out a toolbox from under the ring and repeatedly bashed Jacob's right hand with it and attempted to take away the Tommy Death Grip. So when they were on the outside, as Jacob was about to announce table, Roman took out the toolbox and just smashed his hand to make sure that he didn't hit him with that Tommy Death Grip, and that was very strategic, because the fact that Roman knows how dangerous that move is firsthand, so he done it multiple times. So that was a little story to be told in that part. And so as Jacob tried to drive Roman through the guardrail, the tribal chief caught him with another Superman punch, and then of course spear through a different guardrail as well. And of course Roman delivered another spear, but Jacob kicked out before the 3. And of course Roman, being the ultimate in-ring trash talker, he says, "I do this because I love you guys." He said it as he embraced his inner gaslighter and exposing the corner turnbuckles in defiance of claims that he needed they needed one to win their backlash match. And of course, Jacob capitalized on Roman's arrogance and trash talking, delivered a spear of his own, which obviously was going to be a near fall. And of course, I'll say Jacob, has got one of the best moonsaults, especially for a dude his size. He delivered a moonsault and made the cover only for the tribal chief to deliver a low blow during his kick out. Of course, drawing shades to the tribal chief of years before. Of course, obviously Roman recovered, repeatedly slammed Jacob face first to an exposed turnbuckle and spear Fatu, through a table in the corner. And then this of course led to one final spear, and OTC got the win. And of course, after the match, of course, it was Roman and Usos and Jacob exited the ring solo. Talon and Tamatonga appeared in the crowd as, like I said, they showed up in the crowd, and and they gave Roman a stare down, and it's no big deal. I didn't even take them seriously. And side note, I know, of course, shout out to Mimi from Black Wrestling. She's been going in all day about the Solo stuff. And she was talking about how Solo is not above the bloodline. Clearly he's not. Solo is not even much of a factor, to be honest with you. Just as I said before, this dude can't even get, like I said before, this dude can't even get a match on WrestleMania, let alone be taken seriously as a tribal chief. Meanwhile, shout out to WWE for this really cool Roman Reigns WrestleMania shirt. Meanwhile, Roman is an 11-time WrestleMania main event. So what else needs to be said? So like Roman's already far past a dude like Solo. It's not even funny. But yeah, of course, more on that a little bit later. So with that being said, if I had to give this a belt grade, I would give it 3.5 out of 5 Randy Orton World Heavyweight titles. I mean, like I said, it's not necessarily like earth-shattering, but at the same time, it is very solid. If I do say so myself. So that's my belt grade itself. And so you see that with Monday Night Raw, which took place in the daytime. We saw that Raw kicked off with the Bloodline. And see that, of course, Jacob, always say he was a man of his word. And with this being said, he was a man of his word and took the knee and acknowledged Roman Reigns as his tribal chief. And I'm glad that they went this route. And we clearly see that this is a different iteration of the Bloodline, like a different temperature of the Bloodline, different atmosphere, different dynamic, if you will. And this Bloodline doesn't feel like the mafia in black suits and red ties kind of Bloodline like before, right? I even have a Bloodline shirt, Bloodline shirt, of course, it's one where they're all in suits, and they have the championships on the table. And so the time where they had Heyman, so it was Roman, Heyman, the Usos. Of course they're sitting around the table, and and the table has all the championships, and the Usos are holding the money. And Roman's look like a Samoan Godfather type of dude, Samoan mafia, boss. And with this version of the Bloodline, it feels more streetish, feels more, black hoodie energy type of thing. Especially without Heyman being in the corner, And it's definitely Bloodline Reloaded. And so yeah, it's definitely a different environment. And also, a little Easter egg was when Roman was talking trash, and he was like, QB1, all that noise. It's a Tribal Chiefs time. This type of stuff like this. So that was clearly a shot at Cody. And there was even a point where Roman, is by his, is in the hallway, and Cody's walking past him, and they have to stare at him. So they're kind of implying and planting seeds for a trilogy. I'm kind of good on that, but but as long as Roman gets the W, I'm fine. Right? If they're gonna go that route. That's just my estimation. But back to like I said, back to the Bloodline being reloaded, and Jey Uso was just super excited. Like he was the most excited one when they put the ones, and he had the biggest smile on his face, and he looked over at Jacob, and that was his way of saying, "Now you're gonna know how I feel." Jacob. Excuse me, like some son. The fact that Jey is excited, to know that somebody else who's going to was going to deal with the trauma and PTSD that he had under Roman. You know what I mean? And so I know there are people who are, who are playing and saying that Roman is still, heelish and things like that or whatever. No real character development, but at the same time, Cody's been the same dude uh, ever since he made his return at Mania 38. He's the same finish the story type of guy. He's still there's any real change with him either. So let's keep the same energy. That's just in my estimation. So like this as far as that, and somebody else mentioned that I saw somebody mention that that the Bloodline story has lasted longer. Excuse me, I don't know if I can hear, but somebody had mentioned that that the Bloodline storyline has lasted longer than the NWO. Yeah, I mean, like collectively, it's lasted for 4 years. From the iteration from 2020 up until 2024. And like when I look at the NWO, it technically lasts about 2.5 years, maybe 3. But yeah, I'm talking about as far as the WCW run. You know, so so as far as that's concerned, when you think about it, I'm like, yeah, but at the same time, when it comes to the storytelling, and with the way that they could, find ways to, spark new life into it. I give. If you're talking about factions, I would give a slight edge to the Bloodline now. Like with all things considered, right? And so yeah, so as far as that, I know that we're in the next inning or whatever Heyman said. I guess this is the case now. So yeah, and of course you said that see that Roman, mentioned LA Knight, Boris Keys. I've been talking trash about him. So now that Roman's a champion, there are more possibilities and doors open, for other challengers, right? And so, a shout out to Mimi from Black Wrestling. And I was always, recognize her because we're both super Roman fans. And so, and one of the things I think where we kind of differ is that, she's not as pressed about Roman being a champion as I am. And we've had conversations, on Twitter about this, even as much as today, right? And in my estimation, I believe that I would at least give Roman, a little bit more time with the title, even though he doesn't need it. But at the same time, this is just in my perspective. I don't know how it would have felt if he would have dropped the title in a month. Like the month after Mania, after being a champ for 1,316 days, roughly 4 years. To go from that long of a run to losing it in a month, like at least at least for and even though it doesn't matter, he's elevated himself to sort of not needing the title, kind of like above that type of thing, if you will. But I think just from an aesthetic standpoint, especially after what he went through, with who we call CMP, as name and not nickname of CM Punk, after we went through with Punk and all that type of stuff, and for him to only, to turn around and have a trial run as a champion, like nah. And apparently there's talks of Seth Rollins, supposedly becoming the king of the ring, so that him and Roman could have another match. Hopefully this will be their finale in their story. And my thing is, as long as Roman wins, so they can keep it long enough to to take on over Finn. And there's talks of The Rock possibly being involved. But when it comes to Roman and Seth, people will be talking about want to see it at Mania. At this point, I have so much Roman and Seth fatigue. I'm fine with it concluding a SummerSlam. Because my thing is, as long as Roman finally gets a W one-on-one, because they've been doing this cat and mouse type of thing, where they're constantly, like where they, paths, are constantly spread apart from each other and things like that, kind of tease a few things. But by the time they do have a match, usually Roman, loses, whether it's whether it loses by pinfall or by disqualification. And for Roman to have had the career that he has, and for him to be in a hierarchy higher up in the company's hierarchy than Seth, and you constantly get beat like this, like, nah, dude, it's that's definitely a blemish that the one that you got to take out your side. Eventually, The Rock finally beat. There's a point where eventually the Rock finally beat Stone Cold. And really got that off his back, right? So I think just keep the same energy when it comes to Roman. And plus, Austin and Rock didn't have to drag out their feud for years and years, before they finally got a one-on-one at WrestleMania. They had a trilogy. So that's my thing. New York is up by 6. All right, now. All right, Wemby. Hit a 3-pointer down 10-7. All right, let's go. Let's go, San Antonio. But yeah, you know what I mean? That's just my estimation. But yeah, like I said, when it comes to this, those are my thoughts when it comes to this whole, Bloodline Reloaded thing, and of course, the Nachos are, kind of getting reheated right now, if you look at it like that. But then, of course, also moving on to, to the women's Intercontinental title. It's just like, congratulations to Sol Ruka. But, I'm not too sure if it may be too much too soon. You know what I mean? And, but then again, I mean, she won at the hands of one of the all-time greatest, certainly the greatest female talker of all time, Becky Lynch. So as far as that's concerned, I get that, pretty much as far as that. But yeah, that's really what it is. So like I said, congrats to her. Maybe too little, too soon, but it's, as long as she as long as Soul, can prove that she can, exceed that hype, if you will. And I certainly believe that that she definitely has the talent and and whatever it takes to really prove that that she's not some champ who got it too soon. I guess you could say whatever. But yeah, like I said, congrats to her, and but at the same time, at the end of the day, she is the future of this business, the future of this women's division. So if you're gonna, I guess you want to pull the trigger as early as possible. And also, when it came to of course, in the aftermath of Clash in Italy, we saw that even though Oba got destroyed, he redeemed himself with that promo, and so that promo in and of itself was enough to be like, yeah, pretty much like, yeah, I still believe in him. Not all hope is lost, and it gets you excited and anticipated for part 3. So yeah, that's just what it is. For like the Bloodline's back. Oba bounced back, the night after that match. Sol Ruka, maybe a little too soon. But yeah, overall, I think that it's definitely one of the better Monday Night Raws after PLE. And so and also, let's see, also Monday Night Raw, we saw that Seth Rollins defeated Braun Breaker. And another thing also I wanted to bring up was that Mass versus Mass match between El Grande Americano and the original Grande Americano and AAA. Excellent match, but at the same time, it doesn't really hold as much weight, because especially when that neither one of them are Hispanic. What I mean? And the things like I said, it was, and also I wouldn't be a prisoner of the moment and try to put it up there on on the same status as like Roman versus Punk, or some of these other bigger Mania matches, if you will. Even though it's an excellent match from a quality standpoint, um, but it's just like it was nice, it was excellent, but I'm not going to go overboard with the way that I rate it, right? And it shows that both can absolutely go in the ring, that for sure. And too slow. So of course, as far as that's concerned. And when it comes to Roman Reigns, um, I've said it before and I've said it again. Without a doubt, he is one of the top 10 of all time, and and he's even borderline Mount Rushmore. When you put everything in totality when it comes to wrestling / sports entertainment, because a lot of this is really what it is, sports entertainment. So if you're going by that criteria, um, he's definitely in that conversation. You know, and the thing about it is that Roman is WWE style, less is more, and this type of stuff, that really sells tickets and really brings the fans in, you know, and and the thing about it is that not every technical wrestler is going to be top 10 all time. Certain people I know that you can technically wrestle, but can you sports entertain? Roman can sports entertain. He can certainly go in the ring, right? And so I don't need anybody to hold anything over Roman's head just because he's not, a 5-star super technical guy. You know what I mean? Because you look at the likes of Daniel Bryan, Dean Malenko, or Voldemort Benoit, right? Those dudes, can really technical wrestle, but they're not going to be at the forefront of the company. They're not going to be the type that objectively, from a consensus standpoint, be seen as somebody's top 5 or top 10 collectively all time. You know what I mean? They're some of the best when it comes to just pure skill, but if you're talking about overall body of work, that's where the conversation changes, right? You look at the likes of Bret Hart and Kurt Angle, who are further up on that, higher up in the echelon when it comes to technical wrestlers. Bret's top 10. You can make an argument for Kurt in your own list. Is top 10, but when it comes to just purely in ring, just strictly in ring ability, those are, top 2, 1A and 1B or whatever. Like 2 of the top 3, including Shawn Michaels, right? So Shawn Michaels certified top 10 as well, right? And the thing is, what separates those 3 from the likes of Dean Malenko and some of these other dudes is that there were just more that they brought to the table when it comes to a wrestling standpoint, when it comes to a presentation standpoint, when it comes to a marketing standpoint, when it comes to body of work overall, when it comes to just historically greater matches. Those guys were the ones who really delivered the most. Like so when it comes to Bret, when it comes to Shawn, when it comes to Kurt, especially when it comes to just purely in ring, and also they have the accolades to go along with it, right? So yeah, like I said, those are some outliers, but the thing is, Roman, especially when it comes to a WWE standpoint, I even say just wrestling standpoint, period. He is definitely carved his name in that conversation. And I've done the top 50 wrestlers lists, as many of you know. Of course, who follow this podcast, who follow what I do, and I had no problem at all, putting Roman, moving Roman into the top 10. Like I said, the thing is, does he bring things to the table from a in-ring performer, technical wrestling standpoint? Does he bring the same things to the table as, like I said, like a Bret Hart, Kurt Angle, Shawn Michaels, AJ Styles, Jericho? No, because it's not in him to do that. The dude's 6'3", 265, so he plays to his strengths. You know, but when it comes to aura, when it comes to drawing power, when it comes to storytelling, when it comes to, you know, someone who's more marketable, someone who can, like I say, who can definitely, um, you know, really carry the company better. It's Roman. You know, he's in that in that category when it comes to someone who's capable, who's more than capable of carrying the company. And so that being said, I'll even reinforce. I even bring up my criteria once again. You know that I did with my previous list. And so my criteria consists of the following: it's not exactly in you know direct order, but this is just the variety. You know, just it's not 1, 2, 3. Not that my criteria is not in ranking, but it's just in general. You know, it's just consistent with following: in-ring achievements, technical ability, influence, importance to your promotion, such as drawing power, cultural impact, and competition. So those are my criteria. And with that being said, Roman checks off more boxes than not. When you talk about in-ring achievements, when you talk about his influence, especially cultural impact, whatever, like when it comes to, what he's done for the company, what he's done when it comes to the storyline, like his importance as drawing power, right? Like I said, the competition is dance partners, those things. So those are things that really make Roman stand out. I was just doing, just narrowing down my criteria, but that's what it is. So in my estimation, I believe that Roman, makes the cut when it comes to those things. So so of course that's that's my estimation, and so yeah, that's pretty much it right there. And now it is time to give birthday shout outs. And by the way, also I want to say RIP People Bryson. And and another thing, even before I give birthday shout outs, of course I meant also forgot to mention that that the Wolverine trailer, just recently came up, and we just found out that Jean Grey is going to be in the game. And I saw, like I said, I saw the latest gameplay, and I mean, the utter and complete violence that comes through this, it is very much vintage Wolverine, and that is the game that I love. You know what I mean? Like vintage bloodshed and savagery. That is what this game is showing. I mean, with him actually putting claws to people's heads. I said, oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And also there's even a button. There's even a button on the game where we can regenerate. Like Wolverine is actually able to regenerate in this game. That's one of his superpowers anyway. You know what I mean? It's very much reminds me of Spider-Man, Insomnia Spider-Man. Plus, it's made by by the same developer anyway, Insomnia. And so, as a matter of fact, it's already been mentioned that that Wolverine and Spider-Man share the same universe. Only thing is that that Spidey's not gonna make a cameo in it. It would be cool if he does, because I know that the Wolverine made a cameo in X-Men. Of course, the X-Men made a cameo in the Spider-Man cartoon back in the day. So, yeah. So, I mean, that would be cool to at least know that they're in the same universe. So, big thumbs up. And of course, this game's gonna come out in September 15th. And so, take all my money for this one. I'm ready for it. I'm pumped for it. I'm excited. I mean, I definitely look forward to to what this brings to the table. It's going to be incredible. And so of course, with that being said, I'm going to. Matter of fact, as far as I'm going to do my birthday shout outs. And starting off, of course, May 31st, Morgan Freeman turned 89. On the same day, Brooke Shields, of course, Brooke Shields turned 61. On June 2nd, of course, Mr. Cooper himself, Mark Curry, turned 65. Actually, you know what? Let me start over. Yeah, as far as that, June 2nd as well, the phenomenal AJ Styles just turned 49. As you know, as a matter of fact, sorry about that. June 1st, Mark Curry turned 65. June 2nd, the phenomenal AJ Styles turned 49. June 3rd, Jade Cargill turns 34. June 4th, Keith David turns 70. On the same day, John P. Key, gospel legend, turns 64. Of course, on the same day, Elder Barge turns 65. Gorilla Monsoon would have turned 89. On June 5th, John Carlos turns 81. Drew McIntyre turns 41. And on June 7th, Prince Rogers Nelson would have turned 68. Allen Iverson turns 51. Mick Foley turns 61, and superstar Billy Graham would have turned 83. And before I go, I like to give my word of wisdom is that sometimes God changes history through ordinary conversations with extraordinary people to change destinies. And that was from Sunday's message with Pastor Charlie Day. And by the way, shout out to FBCG's Young Adult ID Conference. It was amazing, phenomenal. You know what I mean? And so that's it for the podcast. And always remember that when you put God in first place, you don't have to worry about being in last place. And you are victorious because greater is He that is in you than he that is in the world. Always remember that of course, greater is He that is in you than he that is in the world. When you put God in first place, you don't have to worry about being in last place. And always remember to listen to this podcast. You can check out this podcast on iTunes, or rather, of course, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else that you download podcasts. I'm also on YouTube at youtube.com/@Von Virginia. Please make sure to like and subscribe. And thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much for watching. And may this day be the absolute very best day of your life.